I'm from New York. I was born here, and I've lived here ever since. I'm 88. I've lived here all these years. I was born in the Presbyterian Hospital on the Upper West Side, and I lived when I was young on East End Avenue and West East 86th Street in that neighborhood. So whenever I go downtown in a car by that neighborhood on the highway, I look up and I see the window of what was then my best friend's apartment. The streets at that time were much emptier. It wasn't this frantic traffic. I do remember the sounds of the horns. Being high up in an apartment and hearing the traffic below, I remember that as being beautiful. To hear the distant horns and the traffic way down on the street. I made a piece later in New York, 72, I think, or 73, called Song Delay. I was working with the idea of sound and how over distance the sound is delayed. So you see the action before you hear the sound. At the time when I was doing that film, we would have no control over when the boats go by. So every once in a while, you see in the film, a boat goes by. I love those moments. It's like a still moment or something like that. I was very shy. I'd be terrified of going to an opening. I'd stand in the corner. I've gotten over it, obviously, but that's where I wanted to be at that time. There was a community of filmmakers and artists and video people, painters, sculptors. We all knew each other. It was a small world. And whenever something happened, the whole audience would be mixed, and they would come like painters, sculptors. So it wasn't just one discipline. It was all the different disciplines, which totally affected probably the way the work was done. I used to do performances in my space and invite an audience. Quite a bit, I did that. Because the museums were not up to giving you a space to perform in or do anything. And they didn't have equipment, and the galleries didn't have equipment. At that time, there was no support structure. So in order to get an audience even, or to advertise it, it was all up to us. For Juniper Tree, I made a poster and printed it out, and we put it up all over the neighborhood. That's how people knew, that way, and also word of mouth. So there were no reviews or there was just no infrastructure. I didn't mail things then at that time, for that particular piece. And I didn't call people on the phone. We didn't have internet, so you couldn't send out things like that. I made a whole set in my loft with a structure. And yeah, I made things in the lofts, like stage sets. I made stage sets for several pieces. I used to set up paper curtains and so on. So I did a lot in my loft. That was one of the main reasons for being in a loft. You know, you share the work and you show it. You want people to see it. You want there to be an exchange, however, whatever that might be. It doesn't have to be verbal, but you want there to be an exchange of information, of feeling, of ideas. The first person to write about me, they wrote about my first video piece, was Jonas Mikas. And he just put a very small thing in the Village Voice, this big, a few sentences about my work. That was it. And then people saw that and came. My goal was to do good work and to have, I mean, I had ideas about how I would approach. Like one of the first statements I made was, I don't see a major difference between a poem, a video, a film, a drawing, a painting. And that was my way of approaching, was to bring these all together. And I think it was what made my work a little different from everybody else, was that I began to work with visual elements in relation to video. The idea of a woman in a man's world was no secret, and everybody was aware of that. And that's one of the reasons that so many women went into video and performance. I mean, not so many, but it was one of the reasons. Not to be in the sculpture. You know, the world of sculpture and painting was mostly dominated by men. I mean, there were women who were painters and sculptors who, you know, broke out of that. But for many, including myself, to go to another medium and to forge, you know, to forge one's place in another medium was important. I got the idea of empty rooms, and I'm not including this information in the show. So many of my friends were passing away, dying. And every time somebody died, I thought of an empty room. And so that's what this show is about, empty rooms. And I've dedicated it to, you know, I based it on 5 or 6 friends, but their names are not mentioned. And the pieces have nothing to do with them. It's just that they were close friends who all died very recently, and that had a big effect on me. At that time, there was a door at the top of the stairs which was closed. It wouldn't go any further, but we wouldn't hear it go back. It always came to the door of the stairs. Then it would stop a while. Didn't hurt me. Didn't do nothing. The work in Empty Rooms is about absence, about people living, about friends who are no longer here. So there's empty rooms.